So everyone says, why don't people walk more in Indonesia? Well, one reason is because of the inconsistent sidewalks. So that's just a hole. That's a hole. Right behind it is another hole. So you can walk in Indonesia. I like to walk over here, but you have to be very careful. And so it's not something where you can let your children sort of play unsupervised. And I'm coming up to another hole, and I'm trying to figure out, and I've got long legs, so not a problem, but I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I think you may have had an issue where you're trying to upgrade your cables, internet access over here, telecom services are so inconsistent. So I just found out, for example, that if you have a phone that's not issued or bought in Indonesia, you can have a SIM card, a local SIM card, but you can only have it twice. So after you come to Indonesia twice, technically speaking, unless they really, really like you, what's going to have to happen is, and they escalate the issue, you have to buy, and you have to either have a new phone or buy a Indonesian phone. So a lot of what you see are these constant attempts to keep up, and perhaps also contracts that may have not been fully completed. We don't know. That's why journalists are so important. I just found out about the IMEI 2-time requirement today. And so, you have to have somebody on the ground. And what's happening now is that a lot of that information is available, but you have to pay for it, or you have to know what group, or you have to be part of a specific group. And that's a lot different from how the internet was when I was growing up. Another hole. It can only be some sort of citywide infrastructure upgrade. I just never made it. So the other issue is also that when you buy a SIM, some islands, Sumatra is one of the larger islands, but it's not, obviously not as big as Java, which has Jakarta as well as Bogor and Bandung and all the cities that you probably know about outside of Bali. And here we go. This is a bit more interesting. So suddenly over here, it's completely paved. From no paving to completely paved. Again, so the inconsistency is partially just the size of the island, which would give you inconsistent tax receipts. I don't know how natural resources are divided up, the revenue from that, I have no idea. It would be lovely to have a journalist sort of look at it, but then again, if somebody digs too deep, you can also see how there might be some issues. So in the United States, a lot of that information is supposed to be online. Some of it might be classified, but when it comes to contracts, a lot of it is just supposed to be available with the click of a mouse. With respect to telecom, SIM cards, again, the issue with Sumatra is that they don't have a tourist SIM card. So that's why you have to register. So when you come here, either you're on Wi-Fi constantly, in which case you're just going from coffee shop to coffee shop. Certainly not going to help you if you go out to the mountains. So over here, you really do have to be careful about the 2-time registration phone sort of issue. If you're not a regular traveler, again, probably not an issue for you. But again, it just shows you how developing countries have a lot of catching up to do. This sort of thing would not happen in, say, South Korea. It wouldn't happen in Singapore. Both of those countries are aligned with the United States economy. They're not sort of caught in between a rising China and a dominant, currently, United States technological infrastructure. Obviously, Singapore has done a good job balancing both countries, but you can see what happens when you have not necessarily too much competition, but just a situation where you're trying to get revenue from your natural resources, but you have to know who to trust. Because just because a government knows how to mine gold and silver, it doesn't necessarily mean they know anybody in the infrastructure, in the digital infrastructure world. So how do you gain that expertise? I think that not enough people give credit to the politicians of a country like Indonesia or any other developing country, because so much of what's happened here, everything from the inability of foreigners like myself to buy property, in other words, we have to rent, we can't get something landed, In Malaysia, I think they've fixed that a little bit. They made it a little bit easier where you can have a freehold condo. But again, Indonesia, after you get colonized, in many cases, it's like an abusive relationship. Whatever so-called inefficiencies, which some people might call corruption, are happening now, they pale in comparison to whatever happened when the country was occupied. And so that's one of the reasons why you got a brand new car over here. BYD from China is quite popular and getting more and more popular. I don't know if this is BYD, but that's probably a Mazda. But you have a lot of money here. In other words, it's not cheap to get one of these cars when you pay all the taxes and fees. Most people can only afford a motorbike. So again, if you're tempted to call, thank you. If you're tempted to call a country, any developing country, corrupt, you just have to compare what's happening now with whatever was happening under occupation.